Good evening, good evening, good evening. Good evening to you. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Good evening to you. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Good evening to you. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Good evening to you. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Good evening to you. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Good evening and welcome to Daring Dialogues. I'm your host tonight, Shantae Charles. I hope that you have been having a great and wonderful day. We know that there is a lot happening in our world, but if you've got some good news, I would love to hear it. Any good news? Good news. Good news out there? Good news. Please drop it in the comment section, please. I would love to hear your good news. So it is Monday Motivation. And some good news for me is I just got another contract, which is good. And now I'm working for one, two, three, four different companies. And hopefully by the end of this week, I will be closing another contract with my own company. And then I'll be booked and busy, as they say, booked and busy. So it is the holiday season, and I did want to let you all know, for those who don't know, that I also do singing telegrams. So if you're looking to do something special for a loved one, either for the birthday or for the holiday season, you just want to, drop a little celebration, or if you want to send a love gram, which is a song to your significant other, I do those as well. However, I only do them for a short period of time because I will also be enjoying my break. So if you're interested in doing the songgram, email me at reach, reach Shantae, Shantae, at gmail.com. If you want to send something out to a special loved one. The songgrams are $25 a song, and they come with a video and a personal message from you after I sing a bit of a song. And I do have a song list, so you'll have some songs to choose from. And you can send that out as a personal message. I know people are looking for different ways to show their love and appreciation this year. I know some people won't be traveling. We know that UPS is going crazy with the rates on sending packages out. So this is a really good alternative to doing that. Again, it's songgrams. You can put that in the email message header, and I will send you information on how to do your own personalized song or video to the one that you love. So it can be, anniversary, birthday, um, and also just sending a holiday song, holiday greeting out. Again, it's $25 per song, and it does come with a video and your personalized message to that person. So if you're interested in that and you want to take a look at the song list of the songs that you'll have to choose from, I myself will be doing the singing as that is part of my professional life. So we'll put it together for you in a package, and then you will get a chance to preview the song before it goes out to your significant other or person. All right. So let's jump into our Monday motivation. We have been reading from Jackie Robinson's autobiography, I Never Had It Made. And we have just we finished up last time, The Price of Popularity. We learned a lot from Jackie Robinson in the last chapter. He was really kind of laying it out there, the cost and the price that he has paid to be who he was and where he was, and also the cost to his family as well. So we're heading into chapter 8, which is entitled The Growing Family. And let's see what Jackie has to share with us tonight and what we can take away from his life. I'll be reading for about 15 minutes, and then I will open it up for those of you who may want to come in and respond to tonight's reading. After the birth of Sharon in 1950, our house in St. Albans had become increasingly inadequate. In addition to being too small, it was located right on the street without any room for privacy. Well meaning people constantly harassed us. They would pull up in their cars, walk boldly into our front yard, and start taking pictures. When they rang the bell, Ray would go to the door dressed for housework to find people insistent on taking her picture. Usually, they would demand that Ray produce the children for a picture. If Ray insisted on the right to privacy, they would leave grumbling that the Robinsons were stuck up and didn't appreciate what the public had done for them. Inevitably, the public both idolizes and abuses celebrities and their families. Just pause and think about that. Again, he's saying this in the 1960s, and it's still true today. We understood and were grateful for their interest. On the other hand, anyone like me who can't abide discourtesies, such as being expected to stop in the middle of a meal in a restaurant to sign an autograph, runs the risk of being called ungrateful. Usually, Rachel was very diplomatic with the intruders, but some of the liberties people took got on her nerves. By the time David was born on May 14th, 1952, we were determined to leave Long Island, and we wanted to either find or preferably build another house. Considering all the traveling I did in baseball, I was really blessed to be able to be home for the births of each of our 3 children. I came in from St. Louis in time for David's arrival on the scene. Rachel had never had any trouble after births before, but this time she developed acute nephritis, which was quickly brought under control. But David had to be brought home before she was released. Willette Bailey, a family friend, was our salvation then. She agreed to become nurse for the new baby and generally help with the children. She continued to help us out for a number of years. While Rachel was house hunting in 1952 and 53, we became even more acutely aware that racial prejudice and discrimination in housing is vicious. All right, Jackie, school us today. It doesn't matter whether you are a day laborer or a celebrity, as long as you are Black. There were numerous instances which proved that. Once Rachel found property in Purchase, New York, we liked it so much that we wanted to put a deposit on it. Suddenly, it was taken off the market. In other cases, the places we could have bought zoomed upward in price when the owners learned my identity. Sometimes it was hard to tell whether we were being subjected to color prejudice or celebrity prejudice or both. Whatever the reason, being treated differently from others is very frustrating. We were having a hard time trying to find the kind of place we wanted. We were looking for a big house with rooms for each of our children. We wanted them to be able to play outdoors with plenty of space, a minimum of risk from traffic, and we wanted water that we could see and perhaps use for swimming and rowing. We passionately wanted our children to be educated in integrated schools. Our neighborhood associations at St. Albans had been pleasant, and we had been proud to see that the Blacks who had moved into the community were enhancing property values rather than depreciating them. They cared for their homes and grounds. They spent significant sums of money refurbishing inside and outside. However, there was one factor which alarmed us. Younger families were replacing older couples. Teachers who were all white and older were unhappy and unprepared to deal with Black children or with the increase in the size of their classes. Remember, this was 20 years ago, and the passion for integration in schools was growing to a fever pitch. culminating in the triumphant Supreme Court decision in 1954. Like so many parents then, we knew our children were growing up in a society where they would have to deal with people of all colors. Therefore, we wanted them to learn about people of other races while they were still young. However, conditions in the school got worse, and it seemed to us that Jackie was not getting the education we wanted for him. This was the conflict we faced, wanting to be part of the great integration movement and yet fearing for our son's education. When the school went on double sessions because of the overcrowding and shortage of teachers, we reluctantly withdrew Jackie and put him in a private school. Meanwhile, just when our house hunting was at its most discouraging, a newsman from the Bridgeport Herald in Bridgeport, Connecticut, stepped into the picture. He was working on a series on housing discrimination and had heard we were having trouble locating. He telephoned Rachel and asked to interview her. After the interview, he did a major piece about all the obvious, subtle, and sophisticated methods that have been used to tell us we don't want you for a neighbor. His article made it appear that the North Stamford, Connecticut community had been exceptionally guilty. This wasn't really accurate and it did not reflect what Ray had said about that particular community. But it was most effective in mobilizing North Stamford ministers who did not appreciate being pictured as racist and were prepared to assist. We received several offers to inspect properties in North Stamford and surrounding areas. Some were white elephants in Greenwich, which the owners were trying to unload on anyone. We had to turn them down. One real estate man, either ill intentioned or ignorant, had spread the rumor that we didn't really want to buy a house since we had turned down a few that had been offered us, that we were actually agitators trying to stir up racial trouble. Tom Gaines, a liberal builder and developer, and a group of ministers, apparently in reaction to the newspaper piece, set up a committee in North Stamford to fight housing bias. Andrea Simon, one of the key members, phoned Rachel and said the ministers on the committee would like to talk to her at a meeting at the Simon home. Rachel very quickly disposed of the rumor that we were agitators when she met with the committee. The ministers agreed to take up the issue with their congregations. A real estate broker had been invited by Andrea Simon to attend the meeting. Immediately afterwards, he arranged to show Rachel and Andrea available properties. The first few places were interesting but lacked one or more of the elements we desired. Finally, the broker said she had one more place, but she was reluctant to show it. She felt it was exactly what Ray and I were looking for. However, she didn't want Ray to see it and get excited about it, only to find that we couldn't have it. She said the builder had a financial problem and that the banks and local merchants would have to be checked before we could have it. The minute she arrived at the place, Rachel fell in love with it. The expanse of land, the beautiful private lake, the majestic trees, and the foundations for the house to be built on, all were perfect. The builder, after a talk with the broker, announced that we had a deal. A year's search was over. We bought the Stanford property in 1954, but were unable to occupy it until 1955. There were some fascinating developments involving the builder. He was a character, lovable but sometimes difficult. He had his problems and we had ours. Rachel and I have constantly tried to assess how wise we were in depriving our children of black companionship. When we were in St. Albans, the private nursery school we sent Jackie to was all white at first. I think we were unaware of how detrimental that was to him. We were simply determined to send our children to a good school. We hoped Jackie's school would become better balanced racially than it did. Then, when we moved to North Stamford, which was predominantly white at the time, we fervently hoped that other black families would follow us. We wanted our children in good schools and we wanted the neighborhoods and schools to be integrated so they could have black companionship. This did not occur soon enough for our children. We now realize how much being the only black can hurt. In talks with us as they grew up, our children made us realize what a heavy burden had been placed on them. Sharon, as well as David and Jackie, went through a loss of identity. Parents often don't know what their youngsters are exposed to: the name calling, the slights, the feeling of being excluded, even the feeling of being patronized, and the realization that there is nobody in your class or school who looks like you. We learned belatedly that a good school involves more than excellent teaching. When the time came for Rachel to take Jackie Jr. to school in Connecticut, she was deeply concerned. She says she began to recognize some of the hesitation that Black parents in the South are subject to, wondering whether or not to put their children in white schools. In addition to being the only Black youngster in the school, our son would face other serious disadvantages. In the private school on Long Island, said to be a very fine one, he had learned to print, but not to write, and he could scarcely read. Socially and academically, he was going to have adult sized barriers to climb. Rachel says in no uncertain terms that if we had to do it all over again, she would elect to remain in an all Black community rather than go through the frustrating year-long search to find an integrated community and then to finally have to settle for an all white community. We thought we were pioneering. Today, Blacks are moving into the suburbs at a rapid rate. That wasn't true 18 years ago when our kids needed it. We did better with Sharon and David when their school time came along because by that time we were more aware. But when Jackie first entered school, it was different. The builder promised us our home would be ready by the time school opened. We had already moved out of our old home, and our dear friends, Andrea and Richard Simon, had loaned us their summer home in Stamford. Jackie had been friends with the Simon's son for some time. They were of the same age, and he had been visiting them all summer. But the Simons went back to Riverdale when we took over their place, so Jackie had to go it alone. Jackie's first day of school is a day Rachel will never forget. When she arrived at the Martha Hoyt School with our son, the other kids were all standing in line. They had just alighted from the bus and were ready to go into the school. As Ray went up the steps, she could hear them whispering. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but it was obvious that they were discussing Jackie. It was a long climb up those steps to where the principal stood. Rachel hoped desperately that Jackie couldn't hear the comments about this strange little colored boy who had arrived on the scene. Ray kept hoping she would see at least one other Black kid in the school. There were none, and there were no public schools near us. This meant there was no choice, and Jackie had to go to Martha Hoyt. Ray was sure that first day that Jackie sensed that the whispers and stares meant he was somehow different and that he was aware of the tension surrounding him and his mother. During his first year at Stanford School, Jackie had one very good break. There was a marvelous teacher, a Miss Carlucci, who won Jackie's heart and interest. She was concerned about him and determined to do something about his reading deficiency. In later years, Jackie referred to her as the only teacher who really cared about him. She kept him after school without making it seem like a punishment. She used to say to him, Jackie, you and I are going to work this afternoon. We'll play a little ball first. He respected her because she could fire a baseball at him. Afterward, she took him inside and did some reading with him. The extra time Miss Carlucci spent with Jackie helped tremendously. Because of her efforts, Jackie did catch up by the end of the year. The school had made Jackie part of what was called the tracking system. This is a system of judging a child's ability and assigning him to a certain track within a grade used by many schools and still used by many schools today. Often the child gets stuck in a low track with slow learners at an early age and is convinced he is not bright. Ray feels the system is particularly damaging to Black kids who have already started out handicapped by a society that damages their self esteem early in life. Children in a low track can begin not to care and lose any desire to rise above that track. And sometimes their teachers are certain that such youngsters never can and never will learn above a certain level. If a child is convinced that they're dumb, it doesn't take much for them to decide to prove it. He is apt to always live with a low ceiling of expectation, and frequently the teacher won't try to change this unless they are a fabulous, effective teacher. In most Black communities, knowledgeable parents are beginning to fight this stultifying system, and thank God for that. At the end of Jackie's first year, Miss Carlucci was terribly proud of him. He had worked hard with her, reacting beautifully to the special attention she gave him. It was the kind of attention that had nothing to do with being the son of a well known father. Jackie knew Miss Carlucci liked him for himself. There weren't any more Miss Carlucci's. As the school years passed, Jackie developed the habit of not concentrating, not bringing his homework home. He was an attractive, winning child, but we began to notice that he was very dependent. Rachel thinks that we contributed heavily toward making him this way. People around this house were always doing things for him, Rachel remembers. He'd get up in the morning and someone would be pressing his pants. He always wanted to look neat in well pressed pants. Someone else would be getting his breakfast. Maybe he'd leave home without his books and someone would run after him with them. He hardly had to do anything for himself. You know, when you come right down to it, you've never prepared to be a parent to the first child. Very few people are really ready. I think we were, all of us, including his grandmother Isom, very sensitive to the identity crisis he had owing to his dad's fame, and we were making it up to him in little ways, showing our love by taking care of him, doing special things for him. Waiting on Jackie even carried over to his school. He'd start out of his classroom after school and just hold out his arms. Someone would pile on his books. Someone would remember to give him his sneakers, his lunchbox. People just did things for him. I think all that catering to Jackie caught up with him in later years. He wasn't independent enough. He'd been told time and again he couldn't be better than his dad. So he didn't have the fierce competitive spirit that his dad had. Some of the lessons we learned from Jackie's early school experiences helped us to do a little better with Sharon and David. As we got out of the car the first day we brought Sharon to kindergarten, an extremely friendly lady came over to me and said, "I'm Sandy Amusin. Will your little girl be in kindergarten with my son Chris?" I could tell that Sharon would have at least one little pal in school. Sharon was the middle child, and during her early years, she was apparently unscathed by the identity problem. But Rachel and I learned after she had become a teenager that she had taken her lumps too, and somehow managed to keep most of her serious concerns to herself. This is not to say that Sharon did not communicate with us. She did, but she was just such an ideal and perfect child in our eyes, and in the opinion of virtually everyone who came in touch with her, that she was sometimes seemed a little too good to be true. While fathers may be crazy about their sons, there is something extraordinarily special about a daughter. It's still the same, our relationship, perhaps even deeper. So, we'll stop right there. But my oh my, did Jackie just give us a whole hand, mouth, and mind full? There is so much I could say on this subject, but I think he did a wonderful job expressing um, what a lot of teachers know, especially African American teachers, um, who are on the inside of these some of these systems, which is why I started my own tutoring and educational services and company, to specifically help students of color because we see what's happening on the other side. And so we try to get parents to take advantage of the services that we offer to help students navigate these difficult, prejudicial spaces. But we can't force you, right, to get your child that additional help that they need. As Jackie said, there were certain things that he didn't realize with his first child, and he tried to do better with his second and his third child. Some things he brought up about um, just the way that school is set up, whether or not your child has other children in the school that look like them, not being able to figure out whether or not they were being singled out because they were black or if they were singled out because of their, celebrity status with his position. I think all of those things are important. Many of you have heard us talk just about the things that we've experienced in our own neighborhood recently. Very unfortunately similar to what Jackie is talking about. People who don't respect your privacy or they think that they can tread on your privacy. Um, Yeah, so he covered quite a bit. But I want to hear your thoughts on this tonight. Um, I think it was last night. Yes, last night I came across a story, very sad, of an African American girl who was autistic, 10 years old, and she took her life, committed suicide. And this was in Utah. And I'm just like, Utah, okay, you're already in a state where there's very few black people. And they said that the child took her life because she was being teased about being black, and she was being teased about being autistic. Both things she was being teased about. She went to her parents and reported to her parents what was happening. Parents didn't do anything about it. She went to the school. She reported to the school what was happening. School didn't do anything about it. So now we have a child that's no longer with us. She has gone back to her creator because the hands that she was left in, unfortunately, didn't recognize the gift that she was in the earth. So I think about that today, and I also think about what Jackie Robinson here is saying in terms of being more aware of what's happening with your child, being more aware of the environment that you're choosing to place your child in, and recognizing that there can be ramifications, lifelong ramifications, for the environment that we're placing children in. Like back then, he put his child in private school, and that was the only thing around and available. These days, there are other options, right? There's private school, there's charter schools, there are public schools, there is homeschooling, there is full-time virtual online school. So there are, some other options, but just being mindful of the environment that you're placing your children in, I think that is wildly important. I mean, I could talk about my own life and being a gifted, talented child, living in the hood, and being bussed into predominantly white schools. I think every school I went to, besides Head Start in my like initial school, which was kindergarten, and then I came back there for fifth grade, that was a school that was directly situated in a black neighborhood. And so because it was a magnet school, but it was in an all black neighborhood, it was kind of like, I would say 70% black and 30% everybody else. But the other schools that I went to, I was bussed out of my community, and the schools were predominantly white. And yeah, it was a culture shock. Most of the classes I was in, because I was either in an advanced class or gifted talented, most of the classes I was in, I was usually the only black student in most of my classes, and therefore sometimes singled out by instructors. But realizing that I was definitely getting a much better education than my peers were, who I lived in the hood with. So it was obvious that we were actually getting an education, and my other peers were kind of getting like busy work to do. So those are my thoughts for right now. If you would like to come on and respond to tonight's reading via IG, feel free to hit the camera and we will bring you on. But yeah, this is one of the reasons why I am super, super, super charged about this particular subject. Yeah. All right. I see Lady Barbara is going to join us tonight.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The more we read about Jackie Robinson,
Mm-hmm.
the more we feel like we're just gone backwards because the same things like the tracking system you brought up, the environment of trying to live. You can't live here. You go to school, they're not going to teach them properly because you can live in this neighborhood. You can afford to go to this type of school, and you're looking to have your child have a better educational experience than you did. But what happens there is worse because
And I want to caveat this by saying, because I've been in education now, this is my 21st year as a educator, as a teacher.
uh-huh,
I've taught in public school, I've taught in private school, I've taught in alternative schools, I've taught in Christian private schools, K through 12, meaning I've had students in each one of those grade levels.
uh-huh.
And the things that I have seen has made me want to fight teachers because they may not come straight out and say, I am a racist,
Exactly.
but the things that you see them doing and how you see them ignoring students, or how you
Uh-huh.
see them withholding information
Uh-huh.
that students actually need, or how
Yes.
you see them catering to certain students and making sure they get everything they need, they fill out a college application, they're made aware
Yeah.
of what the scholarships are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I could just keep going about this topic, but you see, they don't give that same kind of equal opportunity and access and experience to Black students. It
Uh-huh.
makes you want to fight. And
It
so
too.
the way that I have chosen to fight is I've chosen to be a part of the solution and
Exactly.
not the problem.
Uh-huh.
And as I'm a part of the solution, I am finding that it is very difficult sometimes
Yeah.
to get Black parents to do the investment piece to make sure that their children don't fall through the cracks.
Yes. Jesus.
Because I can tell you where the cracks are, and I can
Uh-huh.
give your child the tools to be successful, but you as the parent have to be on board.
Exactly.
Now, I will say I had the pleasure last weekend of meeting with a parent, and I've had the pleasure the last couple of months actually of meeting with Black parents who have decided to invest in their children, who decided that, yes, I want to do the work with my child. I want to make sure that my child is developmentally where they need to be. I want to make sure that my child, their social, emotional self, is
Uh-huh.
healthy as they're navigating very racist, biased educational systems.
Uh-huh.
And I had a parent this past weekend say, you know, my child is in high school. They don't talk to me at all about how they feel or what's happening with school or what's really going on. But I saw that my child was able to open up to somebody they don't know and really share what it is that's going on so that they can be helped.
Yes.
And it really, I'm telling you, it really is important. And I'm so glad that Jackie Robinson actually cataloged and
Uh-huh.
detailed the mistake that he felt like he was making with his own children. Like, I think
Thinking that
more people need to I mean, he was actually aware that here's
uh-huh.
where we went wrong with Jackie,
Uh-huh.
and we've got to adjust for our other children coming, right? And so someone hearing this tonight, your children may already be out of school, but you got grandkids, you
Yes.
got
Yes.
nieces, you got nephews, you got godchildren.
Uh-huh.
So even thinking about expanding your mindset as to What children in my life am I connected with that I need to actually pause and say, especially during this holiday season that's coming up, I need to pause and say, how are things with you?
Exactly.
We've been in now going on 2 years of craziment with the pandemic.
Yes, yes,
And all
yes,
of this
yes.
stuff involving school. And some school districts are keeping track of the children that stopped going to school during the pandemic. They stopped showing up for classes. So we know that that the learning gap is widening from the kids that just stopped showing up virtually, from the kids that were taking care of their family members that were sick during the pandemic. They didn't show up for class because they were taking care of sick relatives. And those kinds of things are things that people need to look at in this coming holiday season. You need to talk to the children in your family. You need to talk to the
Yes,
children in your family and ask them what is going on. How are
yes.
you doing? How are you acclimating, being back into school if your child is back in school? If you chose to keep your child virtual this year, which some school districts offered, how is that going? Do you feel like you're being rushed through your classes now? Because now your teachers are like, oh, all these learning losses, we got to catch up, we got to catch up.
Yeah.
But you're leaving the kids behind because they aren't grasping the information because you're going too fast now.
Yes. And it's overwhelming. Yeah.
Yeah. And so because it is overwhelming for a lot of people, this is a good time to take all that stimulus money that they gave you for your children
All right now.
to
Use
actually
it.
use it to
Invest in
provide
the
them those
children.
additional sort resources
Mhm.
to begin to make sure that they're actually catching up. They're actually getting the instruction that they need. And if you need to pay a tutor to come in and teach
Okay.
supplementally, you can do that. It is
Yes,
your child.
it is. And it's
That's all I'm
that's the
saying.
best
You
that's the
don't,
best investment.
yeah, you don't just have to stick with what the public school is giving you and saying, oh, well, that's just how it is. No, that doesn't have to be how
No,
it is.
no,
That doesn't have to be how it is.
no.
And as long as your child is in your home, you have the ability to start setting the course to make sure that your child is successful. Not just successful in throwing a ball.
All right. But
successful in being able to navigate education wise as they continue. One of the largest complaints I hear from people who are professors right now in college, my friends, one of the biggest complaints I hear is that the children coming in don't know how to think for themselves. They can only write if they're given a prompt. They can't come up with an idea off the top of their head. They don't know how to think for themselves, and they're afraid to speak their own mind. Well, what is the point of education if they can't do those two things?
Wow.
And so we are in a crisis in this country. I don't think people understand what our next generation is not going to be able to do in general because they're missing the foundation.
Yes.
They're missing the foundation.
That made me think about the book we were reading, Push Out, when the young girls wrote the different stories where you couldn't even ask the teacher a question, and the teacher had an attitude, and then the child was like, why, and what they didn't realize when you asked them, the teacher attitude, and the young people today is, why is that necessary? And so it's back and forth. Then the next thing, you pushed on another track because you don't know. And so the teacher wins out in that respect with a young black girl saying that I don't understand. All I'm asking for is help, and you can't get that.
Right. Yeah. The number one complaint I have from students right now that I have evaluated is their teachers are rushing through the information. They're giving it to them verbally, and because they're talking so fast, the children are trying to catch up to what the instructions are, and the teachers are like, I already said it. Oh well. That's not a teacher. Let me just be clear on that. That's not a teacher. Teachers, a teacher's expectation should be that I'm going to have to repeat this at some point in time.
Yes.
And not only that, I'm going to have to repeat it, and I need to give them the information not just verbally, but visually and also written down so that they can return to the instruction after I have given it. And if they have any questions after that, then we can come back and clarify some more. But to just tell a child something once,
and I'm not doing it, repeating
you're asking for frustration.
Yeah.
Just developmentally, children need to hear instructions repeated. That's like 101 of education and learning and instruction.
So
but they're not giving it to them. And then when the child comes to them, they get mad that the child is asking them to repeat the instructions. I'm like, are you kidding me?
So what is the purpose? Then what happened there too is two ways. You get good teachers, those teachers, those whoever, whatever the reason they took the job or position for, it makes, if that child becomes frustrated in that level, the next level, they expecting the same thing. And they may get a teacher like you who are there, I'm giving it all, and that they've shut down. And to me, when you said that they can't, come up with an idea, they can't think on their own. So what is that? It's like you dumbing them down not to think, not to be able. What?
Well, remember we've had this conversation before about one of the things that I was saying is, if I dumb your child down, your child cannot compete in future society. Just the bottom line. I don't have to be the police officer that stops your child on the side of the road and makes them put their hands up against the roof of the car. I can start before then by just simply refusing to give your child the tools they need to be successful in life. Just like it was against the law for the enslaved to read and write and count, the way that you are re-enslaving these children is by not giving them the ability to read, write, and count. It's the same thing. If I don't teach you what you need to know, I am in fact assisting in your re-enslavement. Therefore, you can go through 12 years of school and still not be viable in society for anybody's job. Because I just kept socially promoting you. I just kept smiling. And socially promoting you, knowing that I am actually destroying your ability to economically support yourself in the future. That too is how white supremacy works. We often talk about what is done to children, but we stop really talking about what is denied to children.
children. Ooh.
So it's not just what's done to them, it's also what they're being deprived of. And if you're being deprived of the basics, you
Yes.
are literally setting these children up to not have an economically viable future. And that is what is going on all across America. And in the pandemic, it just widened that gap because you had school districts that weren't keeping up with children that didn't show up for learning. You had school districts where half of the school district where the rich people lived had laptops and capabilities and Wi-Fi and all that. And then you had whole other districts full of Black kids.
No Wi-Fi.
With no Wi-Fi, no laptop, no ability to engage in learning.
They ran out of laptops.
Yeah.
I remember
we had some students, it was half of the school year had passed before they got a laptop. And so they were using they were trying to use their mobile phones to learn on.
Yeah.
So all of these disadvantages play a part in the education gap. And when people talk about the wealth gap, I'm like, the wealth gap is very parallel to the education gap.
Education gap. Yes, it is. Whew.
I think I was looking at some data earlier last week. The average Black family's net worth was like $17,000. The average white family's net worth was like $117,000. And people were like, this cannot just be solved by buy Black.
No, ma'am.
This is beyond buy Black. It's beyond the 2% of Black businesses in the United States. Only 2% of the businesses in the United States that are owned by Black people. It's beyond that. It's got to be a deep financial, reparative, deliberate process where this government does what it's supposed to do to close that gap that this government created.
Exactly.
So as much as I love Black entrepreneurship as a Black entrepreneur, don't just beat up on Black entrepreneurs talking about, well, if you were doing more. Honey, no. This is a 228-year wealth gap. That means at this point, it will take us 228 years to catch up to where white people are with wealth right now. Hear what I just said. It will take us 228 years to catch up to where they are right now. Because wealth keeps going. Currency keeps flowing. It doesn't stop. So we're not here to beat up on who owns a business and who doesn't. We're here to tell you that our government needs to do right by Black people, point blank, period. And I don't understand who hasn't shared this yet with the man sitting at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
He don't want to hear that.
To me, somebody has not plainly said it.
No, because he's a good Catholic. Just saying.
If you mean a good Catholic, as in the papal decrees that enslaved Black people to begin with, then I would call that good Catholicism. That's the original Catholicism. The papal decrees that said anybody that's not worshiping the way we are is considered a heathen and therefore can be enslaved legally.
But it's just that you said something when I spoke to you that was so powerful, and I was talking about the sitting congressmen and everything, and you said something, they're not doing anything, but you said something so powerful, it made me think about it, and they're not training and for the next generation. These people are getting old, but you sitting on everything.
Yep.
And when you said that, I was thinking about that the other morning. I was up early in the morning, and I was just thinking. I was like, I was praying too, but I thought about that. I was like, wow, you're not sharing, you're not passing along anything. You just said, I'm gonna sit here in this seat till I die, and y'all will figure it out.
And if they are passing something along, they're passing on how to get mine while everybody else gets screwed.
That's it. Exactly.
How to keep my position for eons
Uh-huh.
and still have not made significant changes that need to be made.
And not planning on doing it.
And so at some point, you know, I get everybody has a cause, right? Whether it's natives, whether it's, you know, those that are coming into the country, everybody has a cause.
Uh-huh.
But when it comes to the cause of those whose ancestors were cash, capital, and credit, when it comes to that cause, oh, you asking for too much.
Too much.
How are we asking for too much when y'all have not given nothing? I just want to know.
And excuse me, even in reading this book, you still go back to, they're ungrateful. They should be grateful what we have allowed them to accomplish. I'm so over. Oh, Lord. You talking about fight? That make you want to fight.
You should be grateful that that we want to invade your privacy. Yeah. You should be grateful. I mean, you should be grateful that we're interested in you.
And we want to take pictures of you and your children.
You should be grateful that we have decided to treat your personal home like the New York Zoo.
And you wouldn't
we
go
want to
to
stop and see.
Else's home.
We want to stop and see the creatures. Can we get a picture?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can we get a souvenir?
This is not a museum or the zoo, like you said.
So Jackie reminds us that not much has changed. I know we keep wanting to say that we're changing, but we have to realistically look at what is going on.
That's true.
When you can have what we have going on, there are 2 trials right now going on in this country.
Oh, Lord.
And both of them are a hot mess. And as they are a hot mess, there are people who are saying, oh, this is so sad, but I don't see you getting angry enough to do anything about it. And when I say, I don't see you, I'm not talking about us.
No.
I'm not talking about us. You know why I'm not talking about us? Because we already understand that according to this law, property can't protest.
There's nothing you can say. But
property, no matter how much property protests, in the eyes of our Constitution, property only gets the rights that we declare that property can get. And so if you want to stop seeing Black people relegated to being defined as property, therefore our rights get trampled on repeatedly because we are pretty much defined as property in this country. Yes. Even though people keep saying otherwise, but the law keeps showing us it is so.
That we're property.
Then I need the people who are not defined as property. I need you
to speak up.
No. The people who weren't defined as property, they started the American Revolution. See if it was them and their rights were being trampled upon. When they felt like their rights were being trampled upon, what did we get? We got January 6th.
Yes. Ooh.
When they felt like their rights were being trampled upon. So you can't tell me that you are so passionately concerned when you just sitting back, because we know that you don't just sit back
No,
when you feel like your rights are being trampled upon.
no. And then if we come out and stand about and say BLM, they want to shoot you with rubber bullets.
Yeah. So, I mean, this, our country is just keeps reiterating
That
that
we're probably got no
we
voice.
say that you all are citizens,
Mm-mm.
but our laws keep doing something else in regards to you. Because you
Exactly.
can tell me I'm a citizen all day long, but I'm looking at how the law is applied to us. That's what I'm
Yes.
looking at. I'm looking at how the law is applied. I'm looking at how other people can do things to us and nothing happens to them according
Yeah.
to the law.
And I'm looking at how you can sit on a bench and reprimand a prosecutor and person have murdered and wounded people. And you are saying, I'm throwing this out. We're not going to have this. And eventually you're going to say, and whatever y'all decide, he's not going to do anything. No time.
Yeah. And so Jackie Robinson just yet lays out again
Mhm.
that
No matter.
the more time passes on,
Uh-uh.
you can look at testimonies like his
And never have it made, no matter what you do in this country.
and see that
Mm-hmm.
these are yet the same issues generation to generation that are still happening.
Roll down.
And so the challenge to us, the challenge to this generation is, what are we going to do so that 40, 20, 40 years from now, those we leave behind are not
Mm-hmm.
having this same conversation that we're having right now.
Jesus.
So this has been another episode of Daring Dialogues. I've been your host tonight, Shantae Charles. I hope that you got something out of this. If you are a parent, I strongly, I don't want to say beg, but I strongly urge you
Yes.
to please pay attention to the education that your child is getting or not getting. Ask for the recordings for your children's classes, especially if they're still virtual. Ask the teachers to send you the recordings of the instruction. That's a hint. Ask for the recordings and be intentional about seeking out the guidance counselor at your school. Ask them for the middle school or the high school or the elementary school catalog that they use to decide courses, and see what kind of courses that they are signing your child up for. Ask them what track they have put your child on. Is it normative education? Is it gifted and talented? Is it special education? Because all of these courses have levels to them. So if they're assigning your child to math, general math, you need to find out what that course description is and who that math class is for. Because it may be general math, but it may be general math for the learning disabled. They're just not telling you that. It may be general math for normal development, and it may be general math for gifted talented. So don't just look at the title of the course. Get that course number and ask for the school catalog that has the course descriptions and who those courses are for. All right. Remember,
So
light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So continue to go out and be light. Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful week. We'll be back, Lord willing, tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will be on YouTube and we'll be on Facebook, Black Table Talk. So Daring Dialogues on IG You know, we all don't see you on Tuesdays because we are over on Facebook on Black Table Talk. You can join us there for our dialogue. We'll be back reading Black Women, Black Love. This book has been tearing us up. Black Women, Black Love by Diane M. Stewart, America's War on African American Marriages. And we are looking at the ways in which Black women and Black men have had to fight for the love that we want in our society. Take care, everybody, and God bless.
God bless.